So here's the third method for inputting notes into Reaper as MIDI, of course. You can actually create a tune by literally drawing it into the piano roll. So what is a piano roll? Well, if I take this, if I click on a MIDI region and I select it and I double click on it, it'll open a piano roll. So the piano roll, obviously the terminology comes from the old piano rolls, and that's how you had player pianos play music, is you had these rolls and then they had, like, I guess, bumps or something that would trigger the keys to play at a certain time. And so basically here you can hear how different sounds sound like. Now notice once again, I remember I mentioned this is a flute that we have loaded here. Okay, that flute has a range that starts from the B below middle C, so B3, yes, 3. So if I play anything below that, I won't hear anything. So you have to be mindful of these numbers right here. So C3 is an octave lower than C4, so I won't hear anything. So if I want to hear something, if I want to have notes down here, I can't use the flute. I would have to use some other instrument that has those notes. So one thing you can do here is you can literally go and let's say draw a note, and that will correspond to that particular note. So you have two things. You have the height, which is based on you could see how that works along with this. So this is a B right here, and you see the other one is the timing. So this particular B is 2 beats long, right? Because we're in 4/4, and each of these numbers actually corresponds to a measure. So if I zoom in, it'll start to give me some more detailed information about. So this is beat number 1. I'm sorry, measure number 1, beat 1. Measure number 2, beat 2. Measure number, what did I say? No. Measure number 1, beat 1. Measure number 1, beat 2. Not 1, beat 3, 1, beat 4, and so on. And this will be based on the grid that you have too. So if you have a more detailed grid, you'll be able to see more detail in there as well. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and clear this. What I'll do is I'll duplicate this track. Okay. So then the flute, I have a separate track that has the flute loaded into it, and I'm gonna disarm it and I'm gonna mute it so this doesn't bother us. I'm gonna save this to show you something else later, but right now we'll keep it over here. We'll call this one flute 2, and we're gonna delete this region. So now here's the thing. You might say, well, how do I put in MIDI notes? There's nothing to click on. I can't double click on over here. Well, what you do is you select a portion. So let's say you want your MIDI region to be 2 measures long or 1 measure long. That's how it's mostly done in commercial music. You go by measure and you loop them and over and over and over. No, there's a lot of looping that happens. But it doesn't have to be that. Obviously, if you shut this off and you just want a portion like that's time-based, you want it to be 2.3 seconds, that's fine too. But then once you have a space selected, you go to Insert, and you go to, you go to Item. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, here it is. It was Insert. I was right. So it's Insert, New MIDI Item. I just couldn't see it. There we go. And so now you have an empty region, an empty MIDI region or MIDI item. So it's there. So now you can click on it, but it has a determined length. So if I double click it, it's empty, obviously. Now I can go in, and now what I want to do is I want to hover over the keyboard, and I want to scroll down so that my window fits the range that I'm working with. Because once again, the flute can't go this low. So what's the point of having all these low notes over here, right? So now I can fit in here the entire range of the flute. See how high up it goes? See, that's it. It goes from B4. No, actually, it goes from B3. We said up to. Oh, wait a minute. Something just happened here. There we go. So I can fit this whole entire range over here up to this T, and then I can still go here, and if I double click, it'll automatically create a note at that height of the length of this region. I'm sorry, of the length of this grid. So the grid works just like the other grid, except in this case we might want to actually start to think about what's happening here, because we may want a steady stream of eighth notes or something. So you have to be mindful what it is that you're working with. So let's say that I want a steady stream of quarter notes, then I leave the grid set to 1/4. That means that the items are automatically going to be a quarter note long, precisely a quarter note long. That's actually very helpful, right? So if I double click over here, now I have a D, and then remember that each of these lines is actually a half step, okay? So then another one here, and you can have multiple ones, right? This would be a chord, for example. And so let's say that I go out, I now have, is it 2 measures long? Oh no, I'm sorry, it's 1 measure long. Yeah, it is 1 measure long. Let's see what that sounds like. Ah, okay, but the chords don't sound, I guess because it's a flute. Yeah, that's funny. Right, so if it's a monophonic instrument, I guess you can't play chords. All right, so you know what? Let's change it to piano. Limited range, no polyphony. I'm changing to piano. Set a keyboard. Maybe we'll change it to harpsichord. Let's see how that works. Of course, that has another issue. I think that one, the other issue would, you know what, let's go back to piano. The piano seems to be the most, the easiest one to work with because you never have to worry about the range. Keyboards, piano. Wow, there we go, look at that big range. All right. That's right, okay, I had very high notes. So with the harpsichord, I had the other wrong, which was that the pitches were too high. And of course I could have changed those, right? I could have gone here, right there. You can literally click on a note in the piano roll and just drag it down. There's no problem. You can also change the duration. Now the duration, when you edit these, it'll act like a region. So if you have the magnet selected, you won't be able to just make this a teeny bit shorter than a quarter note because it's stuck to the magnet side, to the grid side. So if I uncheck that, then I can go here and I can kind of humanize this a little bit, and I can say, well, I want it to be not quite a quarter note long, maybe a little bit, maybe these 2 notes come in a little later or something, right? So this should sound a little bit more human, maybe. Yep, it sure does. Okay, I'm following all the rules of harmony, obviously. So all right, so that's the deal with piano roll. So just experiment with this, and if you want to extend your region, you need to do this. You need to go to the edge of it, and you need to hover till you get an arrow with a line in the middle. That means you can extend the region. So now you're actually taking that MIDI item and making it longer. If you don't do that, if you actually do, let me undo what I did. If you hover and you see a little kind of a grid, and you start stretching that, what it's actually going to do is going to start looping it. So it's repeating what you did before. So if these 2 bits will be connected because this is just the same thing starting over. Okay, and here, that's another very useful thing about MIDI too, is that if I loop things, then, and of course you remember that you can loop things. Let me turn on, the grid is on, okay. So if okay, here we go. If I loop this, right? Let's say that I find that this one chord, I don't like this chord anymore because I'm tired of those crazy dissonances, right? Then they all will disappear from the other ones as well because they're linked. So that's much better than copying and pasting a measure over and over. Okay, and here's another thing about MIDI that I forgot to mention. When you change the tempo, the quality will not be affected, which is not true of audio. Audio will be affected by, if you slow it down, you'll start to hear that sampling rate will get all kind of gritty and weird. So you can make changes to the tempo and audio, but it will affect the timbre, and the quality. So in MIDI, I can say, oh, okay, you know what? I really want this to be at 190 because I had a lot of coffee today. So it sounds the same. Quality-wise, I mean, it sounds just as bad, I guess. All right, excellent. There was one more thing that I wanted to show you. I'm going to look at my notes here, make sure that I talked about everything I wanted to talk about. And yes, actually, I did. So I will save this, actually. I will save the grid and quantizing for the next video, just so it's all in one place. So we'll talk about editing the grid, and we'll talk about quantizing on the next video. Okay.